About to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
Welcome back. It's Warrior Creed with me, the radical Maajid Nawaz, and as always, my brother, the infamous Usman Raja. Apologies for the late start today. Had to run an errand, Usman, as you know. Had to go and get Big Sav on his day of release. So he's finally out and free from his time, served his time, and let's hope that he turns his life around. But that's what's delayed me today. But we're here now, and we've got a big conversation to have. The topic of today, folks, is discussing the fact, obviously, as you can see from the meme of the show, we don't negotiate with terrorists, says Biden, we finance them instead. The point we're making there is, as well as the allegation which we've made before on this live stream, and that is that the founding and funding of Hamas in origin, as well as this time around, was something that was encouraged by Israel, led by Netanyahu, in particular Netanyahu himself, for the purposes of preventing the creation of a Palestinian state. So anybody, as we now know, corporatist media insists whenever bringing Muslims on and saying, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Hamas? Osman, you've seen that meme. You posted it, where there's a cartoon of a poor Palestinian mother with a dead baby, and it just says, do you condemn Hamas? And our point is, we've been doing this work for 15 years roughly now. And we've been the ones challenging terrorism. And at the end of the day, if Netanyahu has been funding terrorism, then who's the terrorist supporter, really, when it comes down to it? And whether it's ISIS in Syria and the dodgy relationships that the CIA have been revealed to have had with jihadists in Syria for the purposes of destabilizing Assad, or indeed the dodgy relationships that WikiLeaks and others, including Haaretz, Israeli newspapers generally, have revealed that Netanyahu has had financing and facilitating the rise of Hamas so that he can undermine the creation of a Palestinian state. Our point is that when they say that Hamas don't want peace, there's nothing to negotiate, our point is, well, they don't want peace either. Netanyahu doesn't want peace. Biden doesn't want peace. And if they did, they wouldn't be funding terrorists. That's our point. They want war. And what we're going to do today is demonstrate why they want war and how they intend to bring it about. And I want to go into a bit of detail into that. So the first point to make very clear is, what is it that is the aim of the globalists around the world? And I say globalists around the world, I mean it. I mean it literally. There is a cabal of organized globalists. Before I get into this slide, just to repeat this, there is a cabal of organized globalists. Cabal isn't my word, by the way, as you remember, Usman. This was Time Magazine's own word used to describe how they fixed the 2020 election. But there is a cabal of globalists around the world who desire to use any given emergency to further curtail and restrict our civil liberties. Now, we saw this play out through COVID. We've also seen it prior to COVID play out through the war on terror. And in particular, we saw it after 9/11 when under Bush, that very same cabal of globalists, whose mates are still in power, by the way, used the 9/11 attacks to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. And for some unbelievable reason, they think that the same playbook is going to work again. Right down to the wording, as you hear Netanyahu say, this is Israel's 9/11, so we've got to invade Gaza. As if that really appeals to people. It's no longer 2001. People now realize how 9/11 was weaponized for the purposes of invading Iraq and Afghanistan. And what Netanyahu seems to forget is that the experience of the United States of America in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and to a certain extent Syria, though that's slightly different because Trump put an end to ISIS quite easily because, as we're saying, the CIA was facilitating the rise of ISIS in Syria. So obviously, when America stopped facilitating them, it was easy to get rid of them. But in particular, the example in Afghanistan and Iraq demonstrate that you cannot bomb and shoot and invade your way out of an insurgency. Now, anyone with even the slightest understanding of modern political history, let alone counter-insurgency and counter-extremist strategy and policy, will be able to tell you that one of the core lessons learned after 9/11 in Iraq and then in Afghanistan is that you cannot bomb, invade, and kill and shoot your way out of an insurgency. Pakistan's experience can tell you that. It's a very well-known fact that once an insurgency sets off, the way you deal with it isn't by thinking, if you're a state, that you can tackle it head on, because the very nature of an insurgency is it's embedded within the population. And why insurgencies, whether they use terrorist tactics or not, why they're embedded in a population is an entire different discussion. But if you understand that you have to accept the reality that's in front of you, the fact is the Taliban were embedded in the Pashtun population for reasons that aren't the purpose of this show, but that are sociologically, established reasons, right? How insurgencies get embedded in populations. But the Taliban were embedded in the Pashtun population. In Iraq, the anti-American fighters initially, immediately after, if you remember, they disbanded the Iraqi army after they got rid of Saddam Hussein. That insurgency in Iraq, again, they could not shoot their way out of that. They had to change tack. Likewise with Afghanistan and the Taliban. Likewise now we're saying with Netanyahu's desired ground invasion of Gaza. So if everyone knows that, and we can assure you everyone does know that, because we have literally gone to places like US military, whether it's bases or those that deal with this kind of thing, UK military and others, politicians, policymakers, heads of state, and have trained people in this idea that you cannot shoot yourself out of insurgencies, and all it does is further radicalize the population and send them into the arm of the insurgents. We can guarantee you people understand this and know this. And so if that's the case, what's Netanyahu doing? And so it's our point that they do know this, and so clearly they understand that you can't shoot yourself and bomb your way and invade your way out of an insurgency. So what is it they're trying to do? And that's why we're suggesting here, they want war. Why do they want war? They want conflict because their aim is global, asymmetric, fifth generation hybrid civil war. They want to provoke World War III to usher in the total surveillance state under the guise of an emergency, precisely as they did. That was Donald Trump Jr. replying to my tweet on Black Flags, by the way. And so I basically replied back and said, that's the aim. That's what people are trying to do. Now, what is global asymmetric fifth generation hybrid civil war? The first line of that slide there. Fifth generation war, as you can see there in the first line there, fifth generation war is a war of information, perception, and propaganda. That's what fifth gen warfare is. And what we're alleging is that globalists around the world failed in weaponizing COVID to the extent that they could have permanent vaccine passports, permanent digital ID, permanent checkpoint societies, permanent, basically loss of liberties using a virus as an excuse. They failed because voices arose around the world that were challenging all of those narratives to a point now where the COVID narrative has completely fallen flat on its face. If you look at the COVID inquiry going on right now, which is televised, in fact, you'll see that even the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, when asked to appear, he asked for immunity from prosecution before he goes to testify at the COVID inquiry, because he knows that he's liable to confess to committing criminal offenses in that inquiry. So the COVID narrative fell flat on its face, and that's why they couldn't bring in the surveillance state that they desired with all the vaccine passports and what have you, using COVID as an excuse. And the plan was, as we mentioned, and this slide makes it clear, if you look at that again, as warned by Orwell, Huxley, and others, forecasted on my episode 1780, number 1780, with Joe Rogan, right, in the second hour, you'll see that we said exactly that failing the COVID ability to bring in the surveillance state through COVID, they would seek to inspire conflict between Muslims and non-Muslims all over the West, within societies, and in America, blacks, whites. The kind of conflict we saw that arose after BLM, the kind of conflict we saw arose in Europe recently in France, where, for example, online people like Mr. Musk were trying to say this is a Muslim problem. And we're like, no, this is a poverty problem. It's a grievance problem, like the Yellow Vest protests in France before that was. Pretty much everyone hates Macron. But those kinds of protests, what the globalists will now seek is to spark global civil war, fifth generation warfare. Fifth generation, in other words, over information perception. So everyone will have their own narratives, their own identities, and they wish for conflict within societies based around those intersectional identities. Why? Why would you want global fifth generation civil war? Why would you want to provoke that? Well, the reason, of course, is divide and conquer. If you are able to incite riots, and you'll see that's why the media always pick on the fringe element in any protest where, for example, I don't know, they might be burning a flag or they might be calling for violence, and it will be as if that the entire protest is represented by that fringe element. The purpose is to incite people to want revenge against those they perceive as the other who hates them, the fifth column within their own societies. And with the divide and rule kicking in, it provides the perfect excuse for the state to continue moving in the direction of travel, which is a further loss of civil liberties and harsher legislation to curtail speech, to curtail movement. If you see with the Just Stop Oil protests, somehow those Just Stop Oil protests emerged out of nowhere, funded from out of nowhere, and were blocking motorways. The police, who already had the powers to arrest them, were somehow randomly unable to arrest them, even though those powers already existed. And then, surprise, surprise, politicians began calling for more powers, more and stricter, harsher legislation to be able to control Just Stop Oil, who were blocking roads. And they wanted the public to be so outraged that they would throw their weight behind the calls for further legislation. This is the materialist dialectic adopted from Hegel by Marx, dialectical materialism causing conflicts in society, thesis, antithesis, and then when you have the thesis and the antithesis clashing with each other, the people in power through that divide and rule are able to bring the synthesis, the solution. An easier way of explaining that is problem, reaction, solution. They are constantly seeking to provoke problems so that they can cause a reaction. And then from the reaction they've caused, your emotional reaction, you, the viewer, they can come in and provide the solution. So if the problem is, for example, Muslim extremists running around Europe intimidating the Jewish community, that's the problem. The reaction, of course, is the Jewish community and others demanding further powers to, for example, ban the black flag, as we've now seen, which is actually rooted in traditional Muslim, traditional Islamic theology, appropriated by jihadists, but they don't really mind that. They want to ban it anyway. So you have a problem, reaction, bring in further legislation to ban religious symbols, right? There's the reaction that's being demanded by the public. The solution, the government comes in, further powers, further legislation to restrict the right to protest, restrict free speech, restrict the right to assemble. This is how they operate. So our view is that this entire episode in Gaza was in fact, as the Egyptians have already said, and it's out in the press, you can look it up yourselves, they warned Netanyahu that this attack was coming. For 6 to 7 hours, the IDF did not react to the attack, as if there was a stand-down order. It's very convenient for Netanyahu, who was on his last legs as it was. Netanyahu and Biden need war right now. Both of them need war to survive. If there was an election tomorrow in the United States of America, Trump would beat Biden hands down. If there was an election tomorrow in Israel, a national general election, Netanyahu would lose. 94%, as reported by the Times, 94% of the Israeli public, and there is the article, you can look it up for yourselves, Time of London. Another poll found that 94% of Israelis believe the government was to blame for the war, and 59% of them did not have faith in its ability to lead the country. 94% of the Israeli public are blaming Netanyahu for this war. He would lose an election. He needs war to survive. Biden needs war to survive. So the rest of what you're going to hear in this presentation is to demonstrate that they need conflict to survive. And whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, if you're whatever side of this debate, Palestinian, Jewish, Israeli, British, Muslim, anything, if you're reacting to events instead of whatever, responding, as Osman says, right? But if you're reacting to events, you're being provoked, then you're someone else's patsy. It's as simple as that. You're doing someone else's job for them because you're not thinking what reaction would befit or suit the betterment of society. If you're reacting out of anger, you're being used for somebody else's agenda for the purposes of divide and conquer, so that those in power have the excuse to bring in further harsher legislation and restrict our civil liberties even further. And it's in that context we would ask everybody to interpret the provocative speeches over the last couple of days that you've heard coming out from various politicians. And let's give some examples. Let's start with Netanyahu himself. Provocative speech. So Netanyahu gives a speech. You must remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. He literally says that in a speech. Now, what does the Old Testament say on Amalek? From Samuel 15:3, it says, now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, infant and baby. So the command is to completely genocide Amalek. And Netanyahu references that in a speech. And keep in mind, this comes off the back of him already dehumanizing people in Gaza. And so it's only in the context of wanting to further inflame tension that you can understand why Netanyahu is referencing a genocidal moment in this speech. They don't want peace. There is no partner for peace to be found in Netanyahu. And we're going to demonstrate that even in the UK government and in the Labour Party, that they don't want peace because they're penalizing and punishing and sacking ministers who are calling for a ceasefire. We're going to come to all of that. So remember this, folks. They don't want peace. They're telling you Palestinians don't want peace. They're telling you, how can you negotiate with Hamas, the terrorists? Well, first of all, they funded them. And second of all, they also don't want peace, which is why we were saying at the beginning, refuse to pick a side. That doesn't mean don't side with the innocent people in Gaza. We mean don't pick a side between Hamas and Netanyahu. The people in Gaza, we're on their side because we're on the side of innocent people everywhere, including innocent people in Israel and children and non-combatants. But what we're talking about here is that the deliberately provocative speeches are designed to further inflame. So here is Netanyahu pretty much telling you that he wants to do to the Gazans what God says, do to Amalek.
Done to you, says our Holy Bible, and we do remember and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes, a chain that has started 3,000 years ago from Joshua ben Nun until the heroes of 1948, the Six-Day War, the 73 October War, and all other wars in this country. Our hero troops, they have one supreme main goal: to completely defeat the murderous enemy and to guarantee our existence in this country. We've always said, never again. Never again is now.
So it was right at the beginning of that clip. He said, don't forget what Amalek has done to you. We'll play it one more time and end it before it ends, just so you catch it. Do not forget what Amalek has done to you, as says our Holy Bible.
Done to you, says our Holy Bible. And we...
There it was. And the point here is, it's not just Netanyahu. In the United States of America, a new Speaker of the House has been elected, Speaker Johnson. And around yesterday time, again, he did the same thing. He decided to promise unequivocal support, U.S. support for Israel as his first major policy decision, and referenced Christian theology, again, saying that it is our duty, as we're instructed in the Bible, to unequivocally support Israel. And so, again, it's almost as if it's inciting further religious violence. And we've written here, first, Netanyahu cites Amalek to justify war. Now Speaker Johnson cites Christian theology to justify war. The direct quote is, as a Christian, we believe the Bible teaches very clearly that we're to stand with Israel. And we're asking us, pro-Palestine protesters, are the religious zealots. And yet these two leaders are citing religion in their speech to justify war. Here's Speaker Johnson.
My first act as the Speaker was to bring the resolution to make formal and official in the congressional record our resolve to stand with Israel and against the barbarism of Hamas and all of its accomplices. But I want you to know, it's not an accident that the first resolution was for Israel and my first trip was to come and be with you. I want everybody to know where we stand. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I hope to hear this around the world. I hope they know where we stand. There's no ambiguity about this. Jewish students today are no longer feeling safe on their college campuses, where liberal administrators are actively supporting and promoting and protecting organizations which are solely dedicated to anti-Israel propaganda. But we must not only call out these anti-Semitic attacks, we must act. So as Steve mentioned, in the week ahead, House Republicans will work swiftly to pass legislation to provide Israel much-needed resources in their fight against these barbaric terrorists. We will stand with Israel strongly. And I want to echo another message that may have been shared here over the day. This message is to the UN. There will be a ceasefire only when Hamas ceases to be a threat to Israel. Israel and the U.S. enjoy an unbreakable bond that's forged over decades, of course, of bilateral assistance. And there are lots of reasons that we do that. They are obviously our greatest ally in the Middle East, and clearly they are one of our most important friends. Kelly and I have so enjoyed our own trips to Israel. Most recently, we went with our dear friends, Congressman Jim Jordan and his wife, Polly. On that trip, yeah, Jim Jordan always gets a shout, that's right. He's known everywhere. We were walking down the streets of Jerusalem and people are coming up, Jim Jordan, selfies. I'm like, really? Hero? And at that time they said, hey, will you take our picture? I was the photographer. Seriously. This morning, Prime Minister Netanyahu said unequivocally, this is his quote, "This is our second war of liberation. We're going to fight, and it will be the good over evil, light over darkness." Last night I spoke with him on the telephone. The Prime Minister called me, and I used those very words myself. I said, Bibi, it's good over evil. It's light over darkness. We all see that. I assure the Prime Minister of our unwavering support of Israel and her people, and I assured him that our Congress, and under my leadership, we will be there until the end. We will be there until the end of this conflict. As a Christian, I know and we believe that the Bible teaches very clearly that we're to stand with Israel, that God will bless the nation that blesses Israel, that we're to pay peace of Jerusalem. Exactly.
So there you heard it. The Bible says God will bless the nation that stands with Israel. We're ordered to stand with Israel. That clearly isn't the Israel in the Bible. That is the Israel today, because 1948 is when the modern state of Israel was created. And that's not when the Bible was written. But nevertheless, we have this kind of illiterate theology being spoken by the speaker, the new speaker of the House. You also heard him say there very clearly, there cannot be a ceasefire until Hamas ceases to be operative. Again, this idea that you can shoot, bomb, and invade your way out of an insurgency, that won't make it worse, it will get rid of it, is the amateur and illiterate, politically illiterate perspective you just heard there. But it also confirms the point we're making. They don't want peace. They do not want a ceasefire. In fact, they're punishing people that are calling for a ceasefire, which we're going to come to. And so that leads us to the conclusion that we're arguing they want war. They want conflict. And then the question is, why would somebody want war? And that's what you have to think about. Why would somebody want conflict? And see, here you see Netanyahu can quote the Old Testament calling for genocide, the Amalek passage, against Gazans. That's not extremist. That's not hate speech. Senator Johnson can say that the Bible commands them, religious scripture, in other words, commands them to go to war on the side of Israel. As you heard there, we'll be with you till the end, and there's no ceasefire. So the Bible can command America to go to war, the New Testament. The Old Testament can command Israel to go to war, but woe be upon any protester in the streets of London, because that's suddenly hate speech, right? And a black flag is suddenly extremism. As the Home Secretary said here, and ITV News reports, to my mind, there is only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches, says Suella Braverman. She labeled the huge pro-Palestinian rallies which have taken place in London as hate marches. Suella Braverman is the UK Home Secretary. So it's not a hate speech for Netanyahu to say, treat Gazans like God told us to treat Amalek, including killing all their women, children, and baby sucklings. That's not hate speech. It's not hate speech for the third most powerful politician in America, the Speaker of the House, to say the Bible commanded us to stand with Israel in war against Palestinians. That's not hate speech. but those protests in London somehow get classified as hate speech by the second or third, probably third most powerful politician in the UK. Have a listen to Suella Braverman, Home Secretary of the UK.
Over the last few weekends, we've seen now tens of thousands of people take to the streets following the massacre of Jewish people, the single largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, chanting for the erasure of Israel from the map. To my mind, there's only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches. Now, secondly, the police and the Crown Prosecution Service are operationally independent. So it's not for me to provide a running commentary on the specific legal decisions that they are making in real time on the ground. But what the police have made clear is that they are concerned that there's a large number of bad actors who are deliberately operating beneath the criminal threshold in a way which you or I, or the vast majority of British people, would consider to be utterly odious. Now, we keep our laws under review, and if there is a need to change the law, just as we did in relation to Just Stop Oil protests last year, I will not hesitate to act.
You referenced chanting. Is it your view that the chant that we hear at some of those protests, from the river to the sea, that one, is anti-Semitic in all contexts, and do you think people should be being arrested for chanting that?
As I said, I'm not going to get into matters which are operationally independent for the police and the Crown Prosecution Service. They need to make those decisions based on the facts and the evidence as they see them. But I have made my views clear. These are hate marches, and the police must take a zero-tolerance approach to anti-Semitism.
Hate marches. I mean, it is just unbelievable the level of hypocrisy that is on display at the moment when it comes to the rights of everyday Gazans not to be bombed. And historian William Dalrymple got it right, because his response to Suella Braverman made this point. Have a look at this, what he said here. This is the well-known historian Dalrymple. He says Braverman doesn't even once mention the fact that nearly 9,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last 2 weeks, around 3 times the number of Americans killed in 9/11. It's as if they are the Untermensch, or the under people to her, invisible and needing literally no comment. She and much of her party are guilty of jaw-dropping bigotry and racism in this utter blindness to human suffering on an epic scale, treating an entire people as animals or worse. And of course, 9,000 Palestinians, remember, if you're going to treat them the way God told you to treat Amalek, that won't bother you. You haven't killed enough of them, because the whole purpose of fighting Amalek was to kill man, woman, children, baby, suckling, everyone. And so what you're seeing from what we're showing you is they don't want peace. They want conflict, and they only want one side of the story, and that is the Netanyahu wing Zionist side of the story, to dominate. Going into a bit further into some more detail as to how this conflict, this desired 5th generation global civil war is being provoked. After you saw that, clearly, the Home Secretary of the UK calling pro-Palestine marches hate speech for some reason. Now, obviously, in every demonstration, you'll find some numpty that has decided that the solution is to go and attack a police officer. You can find that in every demonstration, but only an insane person would think that the demand, the Palestinian demand for self-determination, is hate speech. And her language there basically labeled the entire protest. If you heard it very clearly, these marches are hate speech, not factions within them, because even those black flags, they were raised by my former organization, Hizb ut-Tahrir, which I can promise you is absolutely not the majority of the people on these marches. Very few people on this planet, including their current leadership, knows Hizb ut-Tahrir better than I do, because I was on their global leadership. This organization, as you know, objective as you will find their views, they are not a terrorist organization, which is why they remain legal in America, legal in the UK, legal across all of Europe. And in Germany, the only thing that they're not allowed to do is organize events in their name, but membership remains legal because they're not a terrorist organization. But even then, fine, you don't like them raising black flags. That is not the overwhelming majority of people protesting on these pro-Palestinian marches. In fact, that isn't even Hizb ut-Tahrir's membership in Gaza is practically non-existent. Their primary membership is in the West Bank, Jordan, and across the rest of the Middle East. So that isn't really what she's labeling the entire protest as hate speech, while allowing for Netanyahu to say he wants to treat the Gazans like Amalek, for the speaker in the US to quote the Bible as justification to go to war. Where's the hate speech? You can see the blatant hypocrisy on display. Now, there is an example of something that I can see how people would interpret as incredibly dangerous for Jewish communities, and that is if there are pogroms going around hunting Jews. Now, that's what we were told by the Times in the UK as to what happened recently at that airport in Dagestan. I'm going to show you the video, and this is what is ostensibly a video of Dagestanis running around an airport looking for Israelis who were rumored to be disembarking from an aeroplane. But then I'm going to explain the background to exactly how this came about. Here's the video.
Пассажира больше нету, клянусь вам, чем по кайфу говорю. Я что, не мусульман, я не поиграю. А где они? Всех высадили? А где они? Да, я вам честно говорю. А где они? Куда, в какую сторону ушли? Я не могу сказать, я просто не знаю, брат. Давно, брат? Давно? Файрадар зайдите, Файрадар, там будет написано, когда. Ну, примерно сейчас.
So obviously that would look worrying to people, right? Until you realize something very clear. And that is that entire apparent protest in that airport in Dagestan was provoked based out of Ukraine by somebody who was a CIA asset, which we're going to demonstrate right now. It was provoked on Telegram to bring about precisely the reaction, such as the Times reporting on it as bloodthirsty Muslims hunting Jews in Dagestan, to bring about precisely that reaction so we could further that dialectical conflict that we spoke about earlier, and so people could further ask for curtailing the right of, for example, protesters to criticize Netanyahu because it's hate speech, because it could lead to pogroms, such as the one you just saw apparently there from that airport in Dagestan. So let's go into that. What happened there in Dagestan? The first thing to understand is this. And that is that to control the means of communication is to control perception. That much is very clear by now. We saw it through COVID, that if you can control how people communicate, you can control how they view what happened in reality. In other words, their perception. So to control the means of communication is to control perception. To control perception is to engineer reaction. In other words, once you control how people communicate, you control how they view reality. How they view reality dictates how they react. So you're engineering reaction. COVID and the Ukraine war showed how easy this is to do for globalists. Now imagine how easy it would be to provoke global civil war if that allows them to divide and conquer. Those who are awake will find it difficult to become tribal. They will see how every tribal cause, just or not, serves globalists in power. Because only those in power, this is the key line, only those in power have the ability to control the means of communication in order to weaponize such causes for divide and conquer. And that's what we're alleging is happening in Dagestan. The means of communication, in this case was Telegram, are controlled by certain assets that stoked up the division to get exactly that reaction so they could have exactly the kind of headlines that you then saw all around the world about Muslims hunting Jews. And surprise, surprise, that's exactly what then Putin afterwards came out and alleged. This is the response. Russia blames external interference for anti-Israel riot at the Russian airport in Dagestan. And here's a quote from the piece. Rumors spread on Sunday that a Telegram channel owned by a former Russian lawmaker who now lives in Ukraine, surprise, surprise, Ilya Panomarev, is even named there, was behind the protest. He has previously provided financial support to the Telegram channel called Utro Dagestan, called Dagestan Morning, which called for the protests at the airport on Sunday, independent media had reported. Russia's foreign ministry said Kiev, Ukraine, had used Panomarev, granted Ukrainian citizenship in 2019, to orchestrate the protests, accusing its enemy of information sabotage. So the entire thing was provoked by a CIA Ukrainian asset in Ukraine who is a Russian anti-Putin dissident, because Dagestan, like Chechnya, is in the overall Russian zone, controlled by Putin, even though they are autonomous, like Chechnya, autonomous but controlled by Putin in terms of foreign policy and military. So here's the guy. That is the guy who's alleged to have provoked this protest in the Dagestani airport from Ukraine. His name is Ponomarev. He's a member of parliament. 2014, he left for the USA. Oh, surprise, surprise. Since then, in 2016, he's been in Kiev. After the start of the war, he declared himself the leader of the armed anti-Putin underground in Russia. His Telegram channel fueled hysteria in Dagestan for several days. That's the guy there. And it becomes a lot clearer when you understand how this all plays out around the world and why they benefit from conflict. Here's an example of a Muslim responding to those riots or alleged riots in the Dagestani airport. Dili Hussein, he says, this is the kind of welcome all Israelis should be receiving at the airports of Muslim-majority countries, because he reports on the website 5 Pillars reporting a flight from Israel to Dagestan was forced to divert from its destination in the capital. Earlier today, after pro-Palestine protesters stormed the airport to confront Israeli arrivals. They never found them, by the way. What we've just done is talked you through in real time how conflict is provoked by CIA Ukrainian assets to cause exactly the kind of reaction you saw, filmed, broadcast around the world through the internet. Newspapers come with the headlines. And unfortunately, over-eager Muslim patsies then take the bait and start celebrating that kind of behavior without realizing that they are further facilitating the divide and conquer agenda and being weaponized for the purposes of scaremongering against Muslims in the public so as to facilitate further legislation to curtail our civil liberties. That's precisely how this all works. I'm going to give you one more example from Chicago, where again, tension randomly flared up between this I'm just going to say it. This glowy, very suspicious group called Black Hebrew Israelites came from nowhere and striped me as another one of these FBI assets that are running around like those Nazis were in Florida, who were raising the black sun flags and the swastikas recently, if you saw. They striped me as a clear FBI-style entrapment plan. We know they've done this with Smile with terrorism as well. And they turned up at the pro-Palestine protests and literally started fighting with the protesters. And it's the same playbook again. These people don't want peace. Have a look at this. Now, it's got to beg the question, what on earth are African Americans affiliating with this new and random organization called Black Hebrew Israelites, turning up to a pro-Palestine protest and telling them that land's not your land? What has it got to do with them? Apart from the fact they've suddenly decided they're Black Hebrew Israelites, who, by the way, you see, up until now, they were running around New York attacking Jews. The entire operation is a bunch of glowies. And what they're doing is they're basically seeking to provoke conflict. And we're demonstrating that the powers that be do not want peace. Now we're going to show you that, because when some of them in power decide perhaps to see the light of day and say, look, guys, this isn't going to get anywhere. We need a ceasefire. This is what happens to them. This is literally what happens to them. Conservative MP Paul Bristow has been sacked from his government post after calling for a ceasefire in Gaza, as reported by Sky News. They're making it very clear, as is the title of this live stream, is why we called it Peace Will Not Be Tolerated Today. They don't want peace. Here's us saying, listen, guys, can we just have a Palestinian state and have a peace treaty and let the Palestinians have their nation, right? That's an extremist stance to take. That's a hate speech, according to Suella Braverman, to say Palestinians have the right to a state. That's hate speech. It's not hate speech to say treat them like God told you to treat Amalek, kill their babies, kill their children. It's not hate speech to invoke the Bible to justify war. But it's hate speech to call for ceasefires. And you get sacked for it. And by the way, it didn't just happen in the Conservative Party. This is the ruling party of the UK sacking one of their MPs from their party for calling for a ceasefire. And then you got the next government, the party that wants to be next in power in the UK, the Labour Party, doing exactly the same thing. The Labour Party suspended the Labour whip to Andy MacDonald MP today, which is yesterday. Again, he attended a pro-Palestine march. They've removed. So the Labour Party kick out an MP because he's calling for a ceasefire. The Conservative Party kick out an MP because he's calling for a ceasefire. Where's the hate speech? The people calling for peace are being told they're calling for hate. You heard Speaker Johnson say there can be no ceasefire until we've rendered Hamas inoperative. Go back to Afghanistan. Did they render the Taliban inoperative, or did the Taliban in the end become so strong because they kept trying to shoot their way out of it, the Americans and the Brits and everyone else who went there, that in the end, they simply didn't predict that the Taliban would take Kabul within days of their leaving their little Afghani government in place when they withdrew. These are the same people that didn't see the Taliban conquering Kabul who are telling us now that they're going to handle Hamas. It's the same voices who failed to shoot their way out of an insurgency in Afghanistan, who think they can shoot their way out of an insurgency that's been going on for much longer than the Taliban insurgency, which sparks in, if you're going to be generous, sparks in the 80s. So the Taliban came after the Mujahideen in the 80s. But if you're going to be generous, sparked in the 80s. This Israel-Palestine thing's been going on since 1948. You think you're going to shoot your way out of it? And I'd argue even before 1948. You think you're going to shoot your way out of it? It is absolutely absurd, and we're making it absolutely clear that they do not want peace. And as we played, if you remember, last week, we had U.S. Retired Colonel Douglas McGregor predicting this. If Netanyahu goes in with the ground offensive in Gaza, the conflict is at risk of broadening to the entire Middle East. And here he is again, Colonel Douglas McGregor, U.S. Army Colonel. He says, Israel set out in theory to destroy Hamas. It is now confronting an increasingly united Islamic world. For the first time in 1,000 years, you have the Shiites and the Sunnis who are united with one purpose, to stop Israel. Instead of responding to this, the president, as he always does, is escalating. Netanyahu is betting on this very heavily and believes that Israel, together with our military power, can prevail. This is a big mistake. That's Colonel Douglas McGregor, U.S. Army, telling us the same thing. They don't want peace. They're seeking to escalate. They think that this is how they win. And it is insane. What's happened since then? If you remember last week, we said Turkey was going to get involved. Look at this. So the Turkish foreign minister met with, this is yesterday, met in Ankara with a foreign minister of the Taliban government in Afghanistan. They are only further provoking people to want to unite against them, to confront them. That's what's going on here. Now, it is strange to us how anyone else thinks that the side calling for a ceasefire is the side that is preaching hate. And you've got to understand that after an actual Nazi received a standing ovation in Canada's parliament, if you remember, we covered that on Warrior Creed, by now you should all be able to see how the Ukraine war weaponized Nazism in order to serve globalism, and how Netanyahuing Zionism sought to facilitate this. Jihadist terrorism is no different. Wake up. We're making it absolutely clear that you're being played here. It's easier to dismiss your critics as terrorist sympathizers than to engage the substance of any grievance they may harbor, because introspection is uncomfortable. Netanyahu funded Hamas to prevent a Palestinian state. So who's the terrorist sympathizer now? We're leaving it in those absolutely clear and certain terms that their aim is to provoke global asymmetric fifth generation hybrid civil war, provoking a World War III scenario. That's what they want. They are punishing people calling for a ceasefire, and they're using the kind of inflammatory language that can only further provoke. It's clear for us. We hope eventually it becomes clear for everybody else. Usman, over to you.
Where do we start, Maajid? Yeah, this isn't... It's almost as if the last, at least decade of work, there's been the last decade of even the brothers that were with us, our brothers that joined us, Wahabi and Asib, who were with us last weekend, who presented for the Institute of Near East Policy to the exact lobbyists in Washington.
Yeah, WINEP, Washington Institute Near East Policy, WINEP.
Washington Institute of Near East Policy, where the exact points that we're making here, the discussion point that was made was to say, look, if we're looking at the nation state model, which we've got around the world right now, post the world wars, yeah? So we'll go, okay, the people who are there now aren't the ones that invaded it, and you can echo that when you look at other nation states as well, yeah, that are functioning, yeah. So the point being about integration. How do you integrate? How do you coming to the point of people settling in and recognizing each other, yeah. Now but not coming from a perspective whereby you want me to move from Star Wars to Star Trek.
Yeah.
With your absolute nonsense, because when we start getting into made up nonsense and you're using that as a framework for invading a land, and remember, I'm building a foundation here for our discussion points. We were talking from a perspective of the people there are now living there, and if the argument is that you keep moving people around, then we'll be shifting everyone around the entire planet.
Yeah.
So let's get people settled in. Let's get recognition of the Palestinians. Let's get recognition of the Afghan refugees that are still living on the Pakistani border. And the recent news came that Pakistan is now going to kick people out that aren't registered. To say, look, these refugee groups, if someone settled somewhere, incorporate them into your populace. Yeah? Because this idea of ethnicity is very dangerous. In fact, when we talk about religion and ethnicity, you're going to get zealotry. Okay, that's one point. The second point with this is some of the loudest voices talking against this have been from the Jewish community. So this is Zionism has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. Yeah. As I've said loudly at conferences over the last decade, Zionism is akin to all of the other isms, the Islamism,
communism, socialism, political ideology.
Yeah, get out of my town. We only wear red t-shirts over here. But the problem with this now is, we can talk about the ism factor with this, but now we're getting to a point of dehumanization. And you have to remember that if you're viewing this and you're saying, okay, why are Dagestanis at the airport? No, guys, they're not Dagestanis, they're Muslims. So if they're Muslims, then the 8,000 of us that you've killed, because there's an us level where I spoke to a journalist today.
9,000 according to Dalrymple there.
9,000. Now, there's a journalist that I spoke to today, and I said, look, I'm not, and he's a Muslim himself, the journalist that called me, and I said to him, look, this isn't, I'm part of the human family, but remember, who are you going to say first, your auntie or your mum? Yeah, who do you connect? And the problem with this is this isn't about an us, and that we look at every victim represents every other victim. But when you start getting genocide, which is, and guys, this is, we had Suella Braverman talk about the worst killing since the Holocaust. Yeah, well, this isn't, oh, maybe this is good news. This isn't the worst genocide of Muslims even since 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had 500,000 kids in Iraq. We've had
Yemen.
wedding parties blown up. We've had, I can't even keep up, honestly.
And that's before we even got to the Uyghurs. Before that, the Rohingya, if you remember, in Myanmar.
Yeah, and the thing with this is, Maajid, it doesn't stop. If we collected those numbers,
that's why the entire game is useless. What they're trying to do is pit people and say, you've killed more of our children than we've killed of yours. What a crap game to play.
No, but this is the problem with this, Maajid, because the point I'm making here is, you see, people have come out and that's the great thing with this. People have come out and they've recognized that humanity is coming out onto the streets. Yeah. And who are the people that shut down the New York train station? The majority of them, they're coming from our Jewish brethren in New York. Yeah, the people that we sit with and eat with. And this is the thing, this thing that's going on. You've got zealotry that I didn't think in our lifetime we would see words like that.
Do you know what someone said to me yesterday? They said, I thought dealt with all this war and terror stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Maajid, the other
failed, so they're bringing it back.
I got a phone call the other day, and where a friend of mine, I told you about him and his problematic other, who were trying to discuss with me about, but surely Israel has the right to defend itself. And I said, well, who's it defending itself from? Because this isn't, and I said to him, okay, forget about, and I have to admit it probably, because they started talking about babies getting beheaded. And I said, look, there's mountains of babies right now that have been killed in Gaza. And if I need to humanize them to you, okay, maybe you're looking at it and thinking, okay, Muslim vermin, but there's a lot of Christian babies there as well. And this
those babies, just to be very, very clear on both, and this is literally what we do for a living: information sifting, broadcast journalism. The baby's beheaded story, fake. Retracted by Bell True, the original reporter that put it out, retracted that story. CNN apologized for publishing it. Sky News refused to report on that story because they said Mossad and the IDF would refuse to verify it's true, which leads one, and eventually it got proven to be fake. The baby in the oven story. Now, just go on and look it up. It is a fiction fabricated by Mossad, propaganda for the purposes of enraging you so you react. Hamas did not put a baby in the oven and bake them. They did many other things. They didn't do that. Hamas did not behead 40 babies. They do many other things. They didn't do that. But it's those particularly emotional outrage stories that make you feel so angry. Why? Why do you think they're being put out there for that purpose, to make people angry in this way? Like you said, your friend calling you and saying, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, and the point is with this, Maajid, that you know, and I can look into this screen and say, I don't even think they can find people that have defended and still defend with love our Jewish community.
Yeah.
I think I need to make that point, yeah? Because this is not about, it's got absolutely nothing to do with Jews and Muslims. In fact, for me, it's like you got big bearded guys with hats on who eat blessed meat. Now, tell me, is that Muslim or Jew that I'm talking about? Exactly. Yeah. And this is the thing with this, that what you've got with this now is you've got eschatological religious zealotry. And what we find with this is that they're talking about America as a Christian country and the Bible. Well, Palestinians, there's a big Christian populace of original Christians within the Palestinian community. Those ancient churches are the ones that have been bombed. What we've got right now is we've got these eschatological cults, like Zionism, like the Christian evangelist movement that has appropriated the word Shekinah. And I had to have this same conversation with a detective from the LAPD who came out, gave me a big hug and said to me, oh, great talk you gave, but can I ask you a question? Do you guys believe in this end of time Mahdi who's going to be the Antichrist? And I said to him, look, who's framed it like this for you? He said, oh, our priest at our church our Pentecostal church was explaining this. And I said, no, look, there's an issue here because everyone's being put into a club. Because, the way we go out and do it, Maajid, where we're talking about not just humanity, but we're talking about like the idea that everything is symbiotically connected.
Yeah.
And the reality of that and how you have to be present and not in your imagination. Now, the point is with this, that this is terrifying stuff. This is stuff that you see in those. I know you're a Harry Potter fan, Maajid. And Zubair is as well. Says my wife, but it hasn't quite caught me that. But they were using the analogy of Voldemort.
Yeah.
And the whole like whispering and all of this in it, and this thing about the end of time, and these are the end of time prophecies. And I mean, the Amalek story, it's absolutely horrific, which is this town where I call it Yaldabaoth, from the Gnostic concept of the devil that created the earth, but there's a high spirit above that. But I won't go into that. But the point being that you've got this sacrifice to God, where the town is given as like a blood sacrifice, and then I think it's Saul who, because he doesn't kill the Ammonite king, God is angry with him because he leaves one person alive. And you're looking at this going, well, actually, this isn't the God of, this isn't Allah.
That isn't Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim.
Rahman, yeah, the
most beneficent, the most merciful, the most gracious. That's not that Allah.
That's not Allah.
Our Allah.
Yeah, and the thing is with this,
and it's not ours, meaning everyone's.
Yeah, everyone. It's not the Allah of the our Orthodox Jewish brethren who are saying, look, who are from a certain perspective even giving us lessons on acceptance, where they're like, look, we're here, we're waiting for the Messiah to come, who's going to bring in that state of peace worldwide. Yeah, and they're there from that disciplined, peaceful perspective. Now, the problem is, guys, I don't think people understand they're poking the bear right now. And
that's why I showed that the Taliban with the foreign minister of Turkey.
And what was our thing? Yeah, our mission with this has always been be like Musa in the court of Pharaoh. And it's become more and more apparent, because that's what we've been doing, Maajid. We've been going out there, we've been going, look, guys, you need to stop what you're doing. I mean, the good thing with this is that I believe that the majority of humanity is with us, as we saw there with the author Darren. How do you pronounce it?
Dalrymple, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look at
great
that
author as well.
Yeah. He's a very well-known historian, and look, he's made it very clear. Not even once did she nor Speaker Johnson, by the way, if you remember the speech we just played by that new Speaker of the House, didn't mention Palestinians once. If you caught that, not once. And by the way, look, this is not a death competition. To say 9,000 died, the fact is that every death is tragic. So those deaths that happened on the 7th of October, we've said it before, we'll say it again. We condemn non-combatant civilian death of children, of women, of non-combatants in every single case, always, because that's not the way of the warrior. That is not the way of the mujahid. That isn't, you don't go around killing women, children, non-combatants, even if they're men and they're non-combatants, slitting their throats, whatever's being alleged. That isn't so that's condemned. But the thing is now that Netanyahu is presenting themselves as he wants revenge for that. So we'll ask again, how many deaths of children is revenge for that? Because we've got to 9,000. 50% of Gaza are children. So let's just take a rough guess now. Half of that, 4,500 dead children. If you're just going to be rough about it. Now, come on. Like, how much vengeance do you need? And yet the ground forces still haven't gone in. And the worst part of it is it shouldn't even be it's not even a competition in the first place as to who's dead.
At which point do you separate? I mean, the problem with this is, how did we, when we've died, when we've spoken to people and we've gone, okay, look, guys, the whole issue here is that when we had ISIS, for example, we were saying, look, ISIS have come in and they've used the relationism within the community to go in and say, look, your brothers and sisters are suffering over here. So people have gone with, you have to remember, the guys that went to join ISIS didn't go to rape and pillage. They went there to fight Assad's regime. Remember, before ISIS was even there, Maajid, they had little videos where Assad's regime was raping and murdering and killing. So you had guys from England. At first, remember, the Home Office allowed it. They allowed the foreign fighters. And then all of a sudden, it became illegal to be a foreign fighter. And then all of a sudden, ISIS was there. Yeah. Now, the point is with this, that these guys didn't go to join ISIS. Yes, later, remember, we were the ones at the front line dealing with it. I had those guys attempting to murder me. Do you see what I mean? So
this is what, and they're asking us, do you condemn Hamas? Guys, who are you talking to?
This is but the thing is with this, Maajid, it's like, I'm not even trying to validate that, because I'm saying, look, guys, let's diagnose this and say, you cannot, people are sitting there right now, and look, I have to bring in all of my ability to deal with things when I'm looking at things and I'm going, this is irrational. There's no dignity being given to Muslims, but also the point is with this is the same thing that we've seen happen all the way through, and then you can't just apologize and do the same thing again. And the other thing with this is, Maajid, when it even comes to Israel, remember the Shabra and Shatila massacre,
of course.
Remember, and as we start counting, when you get the body count, what is, because this is the question, isn't it? What is the value of a human being? And you got to remember, my point with this has always been that we're the warners. We're here to warn, to go, look, guys, that this isn't the right way to do, not even the right way to do things. You're doing something where you've pushed it, and now people are sitting there. I mean, I received a video. That I had to delete, Marge. I put it on. I didn't even, and it was an open grave where people.
Atrocity porn.
What's that?
Atrocity porn.
Atrocity porn, yeah.
It started with Bosnia. Do you remember? That's what initially got me radicalized as a 15-year-old. I was subjected to atrocity porn. I literally watched VHS tapes presented to me as somebody saying, this is what they're doing to Muslims in Bosnia. And it was testicles on a tray. They're cutting off their penises. As a 15-year-old, I couldn't process it.
Remember, that's our same story, Mod. That's our story.
That's right.
That's our thing.
The Ukraine war, they used atrocity porn to wind up people, to get them to go and join the Ukraine. Now look at Time magazine. It's just reporting on Zelensky, and he's saying the world has basically abandoned me. What did you expect? Literally, you are the next current thing until the next current thing started in Gaza.
But they don't understand that when while we're talking like this right now, we're also talking about the fact of we need to pour water on this in the circle of influence, because the point is with this that the Zionist monsters should not put the Jewish community at risk. British Jews are British and they're Jews. How many times? But this is absolutely insane, Martin.
Well, I mean, look, the odd thing is, right, the number of people that are now astroturfing our social media, and of course, the pro-Netanyahu Zionist astroturfing on social media to give the impression that he's more popular than he is. Astroturfing is when you get a whole bunch of paid-for PR accounts to reply to every Netanyahu critical post as to give the impression that the masses of people are standing with Netanyahu. That's called astroturfing. And it's all over our social media. And part of what they're doing is say, oh, you guys have become re-radicalized, right? Now, I'm just going to ask you one simple question. When the shit hits the fan, who are you going to come and ask to try and de-radicalize people? Think about it for a second, just for a second. You're going to go to that son of Hamas guy. Yeah, the guy that's currently he went onto I saw who are you in Britain? Let's speak about the West for a minute. America, Britain, Europe. Who are you going to ask to try and calm the situation down? The people who you're now saying have become re-radicalized because we're criticizing Netanyahu.
No, but this is the problem, isn't it, Maajid? That even the sellout stooges, they brought. Remember when I left the Home Office contract, I said to you, I said, look, we got this thing through the pilot. Now they want to bring the sellout stooges in. Yeah, and it was okay. So we're not staying in this thing, and we're not going to stay in it for it to go into perfection. Yeah. Now the point is with this, that even there, even those guys are going to be struggling right now. Even those guys are going to be, because the problem with this is when we're on a planet where horrors are broadcasted, but also you've got this type of language, which is to literally polarize. It's like you had Erdogan say, "Guys, what do you want?" He goes, "What do you want? Do you want another conflict between the cross and the crescent?" Because they forget that. Remember, when we're talking about history, the history is still all alive. That all of the atrocities that have been committed from Algeria through what was done in Chechnya, all of this stuff. When you're looking at Dagestan right now, Dagestan and Chechnya, Putin's probably one of the things that he's done over there is he's looked at those communities and accepted their traditions and
which is how he got peace.
Yeah, and how he's got peace.
I know Dagestanis, man. As I said to you before, I was in Egypt, in prison. Two of my very, very close friends were Dagestanis. Professional bomb maker Omar Hajiev, and both of them are wrestlers, by the way, which is interesting because they've got a strong wrestling tradition in the mountains there.
Yeah.
It's right next door to Chechnya. And Ahmed Mohammadov. And it's a very, very small country and right next door to Chechnya, but very, very Muslim. And what Putin realized, as you've correctly said, is because they had, since Stalin, who tried to purge the entire community, they've had conflict there. Of course, Imam Shamil, and of course, after that, Dudayev. Now, Dudayev, who was a Russian military officer, but originally from that region, was originally a member of my former organization, Hizb ut-Tahrir. He's the guy that started the revived new war of independence.
And Sheikh Dagestani is our son.
That's right. We know the communities very well there.
And this is the problem with this, Maajid, that when you start looking at, because this is where that challenge, once again, we've got the citizenship challenge coming in now, haven't we? We've got this, okay, prove you're British or prove, because you have to detach yourself. This insanity where it's like, okay, these are hate marches, Maajid.
Yeah.
And remember, we've been involved in this. I know it's probably, this is almost like a personal conversation between me and you, but this is insane, Maajid.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, I'm like,
it's like, why did we just do the last 10 years?
Yeah. I'm talking to you and I'm going, this is nuts.
We just spent the last 10 to 15 years dealing with this, resetting the entire conversation, and it's as if it didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's as if literally it didn't happen. Suddenly it's like Muslims are all extremists, protesting for Palestinians' hate speech. We've got to ban freedom of assembly.
And the point is with this, it's like, I was making this exact point, which I knew it was always unfashionable for me to go, look, Zionism, we can't conflate Zionism with being Jewish. And remember, I said to our friends as well, I said, look, all we need to do is if people get to know the Jewish community, they love the Jewish community. And it's not that difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to, and you go around and you build bridges. But you know what the great thing is right now? Look at the people who are speaking against this and coming out, not from a reactionary perspective, but from a common sense perspective. There are Jewish brethren as well. Do you see what I mean? So that's one thing that really gives me hope. Yeah, Seth Rogen and those guys before all of this, he was saying, look, this has got nothing to do, Israel's got nothing to do with being Jewish. He's a New York Jew. Do you see what I mean? And so the point is with this, it's like people understand that if you've got someone calling themselves the Salvation Army, but they're a bunch of punks going around robbing people on the streets, but they were able to get a hold of some Salvation Army uniforms. You're not going to say, yeah, you're the Salvation Army just because you got the uniforms. Do you see what?
I'm going to ask our American listeners, if you're listening right now, right, and you remember when Biden pulled out of Afghanistan, and you remember when the Taliban, within days, retook Kabul, and you remember the shock with which you watched as the Taliban acquired all the weaponry left behind to the point now where they own more Black Hawk helicopters than the entire British Army. the what do you want to call them? The alliance, whatever it was, the America, UK that went in there, spent 22 years fighting the Taliban to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And a whole bunch of money, trillions of dollars in 22 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. And you think you can shoot your way out of an insurgency?
Also, Maajid, so from a British perspective, so as a, I've got guys that I'm dealing with. One of them who's had like his leg blown off. Another one, he's got a prosthetic limb. Someone from the special forces who's got PTSD from the stuff that he saw over there. He actually converted to Islam with the Afghan people in Afghanistan. But the point is with this, Maajid, that when we get to like the casualties, one thing I've noticed with all of this, and the same complaint is, there's an element of us where we've done it Queen and country, and then you start going, but does anyone even care about the country? Does anyone even care? There's the level of like, goodness for goodness sake. But then now we're in this stage where everyone's, first off, they're turning around and they're looking turn around and attack, find a minority that you can just attack.
Well, how does that serve the country? How does sacking an MP
who asked for a ceasefire, Maajid, asked for peace, and they sacked him?
How does that serve the country? So now we're saying that calling for a ceasefire, calling for peace, is unacceptable hate speech.
Well, you know what? I'm waiting for a phone call from some of our friends who are still there at some of these groups, and to figure out how they're navigating this, because we're out, because we've stepped out, but they're still in it.
This is why I'm honestly, because I've been teasing on social media to some of those lot, like tagging them, saying, what are you saying here? Because if you're in the counter extremism industry, right? Let's say Mr. Robin Simcox, I hope you're watching, currently the UK head of counter extremism czar, right? Robin Simcox, who was an intern with Douglas Murray at the Centre for Social Cohesion. We know Robin very well. Hello, Robin. It's not like a personal attack. Hello, mate. How are you? What is this? What are you saying here? Is it hate speech to call for a ceasefire? Is that your understanding of extremism? Because when we were training you in this, that's not what we trained you on. What is it that you're saying? Is calling for a ceasefire in Palestine hate speech that deserves a minister or an MP being sacked both in the Conservative Party and in the Labour Party, while Netanyahu can say treat Gazans like Amalek? I mean, they're really stuck. What are they going to say? Because their job is to de-radicalize. De-radicalize your way out of that one.
Maajid, literally. I mean, this is going to be, we've got a long conversation on the dinner this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem with this is it's like you're sitting back and you're having to have duck. It's like literally I'm sitting in the prayer room and I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay. Sometimes you just have to trust. Sometimes you have to be, because there's a shift there from the level of people know each other now. You even had Nick Griffin tweet out, Nick Griffin of all people.
Yeah. That's the head of the BNP, British National Party. Yeah.
Tweet out in support of the Palestinians. I'm like, okay, that's how insane it's got, where it's like.
Tommy went a bit weird, didn't he? Old Stephen Yaxley led. Well, he went a bit weird on it, didn't he?
Oh no, but it's the industry, isn't it? This is
Jordan Peterson, didn't he?
It's the industry. Yeah. And this is the problem with this, that this thing can't. They've humanized Muslims. Everyone knows Muslim now. Everyone, Andrew Tate.
This was my point. It's no longer 2001, bro. In 2001, right, when they went into Iraq and Afghanistan. Think about it, because the thing is, you and I take this for granted, bro, right? And our children weren't born when 9/11 happened, right? So now we're 45 and it's 2023. It's easy for us to look around us and just forget how ignorant the debate was in 2001. When they went into Iraq and Afghanistan in 2001, when President Bush went into Iraq, he didn't know the difference between Sunni and Shia Muslims. They actually didn't realize that 60% of Iraq was Shia, and that by toppling the Sunni Saddam Hussein, they were throwing Iraq into the Iranian sphere of influence. They didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So it's not 2001 anymore. That level of ignorance is no longer there.
The level of ignorance is still there within this.
In them.
Extreme.
Yeah, but in the people that are out there protesting, they're awake to this stuff.
Yeah, and the problem with this is now, Maajid, that what they've done is, you see, do you remember we talked about that they were coming from that dogmatic perspective? So even when you had the sellouts there are still coming from the book. Oh, the book says this.
Yes.
If you've got, and the problem now is you've got all of these people coming from their little novels. So you've got Star Trek and Star Wars and I don't know, whatever else you want to talk about here. But now, Amalek, and we're going to go in there as if each mother doesn't love its child and they don't watch. You think the people in Gaza are still sitting there watching the same soaps you're watching, the same movies you're watching, they're not listening to the same music you're listening to.
Bro, you know what? You know,
the world now.
It is for me, and you know this, our community knows this. It's as simple as this. We don't even ascribe religion to babies. They are literally innocent children, regardless of whether they were born. Netanyahu's 6-month-old child would be seen as an angel by us.
Yeah.
It is not.
This is the point. The reason I'm trying to make this point here is I'm having to this is back to humanizing conversation. So it's like on my Instagram, I'll be like, okay, let me try and put out some put the argument out there, because this sci-fi belief that's there, it's science fiction nonsense, where you've actually got people that are rational people, supposedly rational people, saying, oh, but the land didn't belong to them. That's why we're going, as if it's like a valid, like a squatter's come into your house, kicked you out.
But the same people saying that, by the way, the same people saying that are currently in the world's most powerful, historically ever powerful military state, with the original Native Americans still in their enclosed communities. Yeah. Apply that standard to the United States of America and give the Native Americans the entire federal government to run. It makes absolutely no sense. In Australia, with the Aboriginal communities, they've just voted down a law that would have given them even further rights. It makes no sense to approach the world through that lens, because you turn it upside down.
The way, my thing is maybe we're too lovey-dovey with this. Pull up the borders, feed everyone, roof over their heads, and watch what happens.
Yeah,
watch what happens. Yeah, you're going to get, because when it comes down to human beings want peace, they want love, they want comfortability. Yeah, the problem is exactly what we started the show with. Tribalism, the intersectional lines, but it's scary when these things are deciding policy. And the reason they're deciding policy is because, as Friedman said about America keeping it needs to keep an imbalance there to keep itself in power. What we've got now is we're at a stage right now where the dollar has gone to shit.
Yep.
Everything's moving to what they call the Middle East, or you can call it the global South, whatever term you want. Everything is moving across. That's why Saudi's building
Neon
City and all of the Neon. And but the point, that's why they're holding the football matches, the concerts. Guys, this is no longer. I had this conversation a couple of days ago. So look, MBS has cut the balls off the extremist machine, and you can now catch a train to the outskirts. You can go into Medina as long as you don't go into the actual mosque.
Yeah.
So you've had Jewish religious ceremonies for the first time recorded and happening with the authorities knowing in Saudi Arabia. Yep. So when you're talking about
on that note, by the way, Jared, what's his name? Trump's Jared. Kushner, he literally just went to Saudi Arabia and gave a speech there about this topic.
Yeah. And
saying, look, in fact, the quote was, Jews are currently safer in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if it's true, but he said Jews are currently safer in Saudi Arabia than New York.
No, this is the difference, isn't it? Because what you've got with this is that you've seen the Muslim. We know the Muslim populaces.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when Sikhs go to Pakistan, they get welcomed. The Muslims are very. People don't know. Why do you think the Crusaders were able to come in, take it over, and it took 80 years? Muslims are not. When it comes down to the level of going around and converting people with a sword and doing all of that, Muslims are very welcoming people. They're quite, but it's the ones within it that are from the martial tradition. Even we're welcoming.
Well, I'd say even more so because it's part of the martial tradition.
Yeah,
the Mujahid is expected even more so to be of that type. The story we remember of, Imam Ali, the companion of the Prophet in the battlefield, and he had someone spat on him and he said, I can't kill you now because I'd be doing it from anger. And he walked away.
It was the Battle of Champions as well. So the battle that normally it can decide the whole battle. Now, the point is with this, Maajid, that remember our rules, because this is the funny thing with this, yeah? The Amalek rules are kill everything, yeah? But Hazrat Abu Bakr, so this is the first Khalif of Islam, goes, don't kill children, don't kill women, don't kill old men, don't cut down any trees, don't kill any cows, sheep, or camels unless it's to eat. And you might see people that have dedicated their lives to monasticism. Do not go near them. Don't bother them.
And I'm going to say something that might sound controversial, but I'll tell you, coming from us, take it from people that have worked in this field for the last 15 years, terrorism, right? Training highest level, military and civilian, CENTCOM, SOCOM, you name it, we've been there. Marshall Center in Germany, security sectors here in the UK, in the US, across the Five Eyes communities, heads of state. Take it from me. What Osman just said there has been the Muslim tradition, not to touch civilians, non-combatants, priests and monks, people that are basically not the ones directly and only immediately fighting you. That's been the tradition all the way up until what? This bit I'm going to say that might sound controversial to you, but it's factually the case. Until CIA asset bin Laden started terrorism with Al-Qaeda, all the way through, Hamas was founded by funding from Mossad, and the CIA was facilitating ISIS and the jihadists in Syria. And they began from the prisoners that they had in Iraq after they captured them in the insurgency that started there when they invaded Iraq. Those prisoners were under American care and custody. They're the ones that became ISIS. Terrorism began after the CIA started playing with Islamic tradition. That's just a fact. From bin Laden onwards, bin Laden was a CIA asset.
And suicide bombing was learned by Hamas from Hezbollah. So it's actually cross ideologies. Do you see what I mean? So the point is with all of this stuff, when you're talking about the phenomenon of terrorism, guys, there's no one on the planet, literally, this is a factual statement. No one on the planet knows more than this or has been as successful as us with this. And if you want evidence of that, come. The evidence speaks for itself. But the point is with this, that when you're looking at this phenomenon, and we're even talking about rooting out Hamas, the way you root out Hamas is ideologically you break them. Yeah, this is the whole point. With people say, "Oh, did the Gazans voted Hamas?" Of course, they didn't vote Hamas in. You don't vote the mafia in. You think they could have? Yeah, they take the power. This is what happens in those places. They take the power. Where do you think the so-called billions in aid has gone? Yeah, one of the conversations that always used to happen was that if you went over to Palestine and met with the leadership, you'd be meeting with them in their big mansions with massive cars. And no one talks about this stuff. The problem we've got with all the way around with this is that Israel, it's been complicit within this, has propped up. It's created its own issues. You have to wonder when it takes 6 hours for them to respond in a country that I think you can get across it in 20 minutes, Maajid.
I've been up and down it.
Yeah.
right up to the Golan Heights, all the way down to the Gaza border, and of course into the West Bank, into Ramallah. It's a tiny country.
Yeah. 6 hours, Maajid. If I lost my dog and called the dog warden, yeah, which I did, the dog warden was there. You go, oh, couple of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he was busy. That's a dog warden. We're talking about counter-terrorism there. We're talking about a country that's so small and
remains on alert all the time.
6 hours.
Dude, just imagine. Remember that attack at Parliament where the police officer was killed in the UK? It was very quick. And then after that, there was an attack attempted after that. What was
it? Mahmoud from Luton.
Remember the response time? It was like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Something like really. That's the terrorism response in Britain, which is a country far bigger than Israel and far larger in population.
Yeah.
6 hours, look, in the security sector, let's take it from us. We played the video of the Israeli former IDF speaking on that. 6 to 7 hours for a terrorism response. It just makes no sense.
You can't fathom it, no.
No sense.
If you could get away with 6...
In other words, there was a stand-down order. Quite obvious to somebody working in that's a stand-down. If I was still advising a prime minister, right, I'd be like, Mr. Prime Minister, that's obvious. There's a stand-down order. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. You've got a mole. No response to the worst terrorist atrocity in history for 6 hours? Just imagine. You're saying it's like America's 9/11. Did it take 6 hours in America for them to respond to 9/11?
But this, once again, Maajid, another point that you brought up, you had the button pushing. America's 9/11. Yeah, because after 9/11, what did they do? They
invaded. Yeah.
Bombed and invaded. But the problem with this is, even with the invasion and the carpet bombing, what they've done in Gaza so far, they've dropped more bombs in Gaza than America dropped post 9/11.
They dropped more bombs in Gaza in a week than they dropped in a month in Iraq to defeat ISIS. In a week. And 50% of Gaza are children.
Yeah.
It is like Osman and I, who are trained in not allowing our emotions to overtake our judgment, right?
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, thank you.
People online have been saying, Maajid, how do you remain so calm? Seriously, we're trained in looking at things calmly to provide solutions, to respond and not react. And we're sitting here like, what the fuck is happening? Like, calm down.
Yeah.
It is.
Do you know that thing where it's like there's a story of the guy goes into the hairdressers and the hairdresser's cutting his hair.
Yeah.
And he goes, can you cut out all the greys? And the hairdresser's there. Then he goes, oh, fuck it. And he just drops scissors, walks out.
Bro, I told you, right? I had it wasn't a fight, but it was a big, loud debate where I had to tell a brother off, and he had a cutthroat knife in his hand. He's like, more people need to die. We need to kill them Israelis. And I had to tell him off. I sat him down and I said, don't you dare speak like that in front of me. If I'm speaking to you, listen and you understand I'm twice your age and I'm your older brother. I've got twice the experiences. Because I said to him, can I, as your older brother, give you some advice? Stop calling for death. And he flipped, right? So I had to tell him off. Point is, what I'm trying to say is we're out there trying to calm people down. Do you understand how difficult this is to get?
Maajid, it's 24/7 right now. It's 24/7. I've got to a stage right now where it's like that.
But this isn't, no, what I'm trying to say is this isn't a complaint. It's talking about how mad it is, because if you want us to do that in the meanwhile, you're sacking people for calling for ceasefires.
But that's the danger, Maajid, because I'm saying to you right now, what is hate speech?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at it and I'm going, well, yeah, where Suella Braverman just talked about people just talking at the fringe of hate speech. What is that fringe? That level of where you've just gone to the edge, but you're not quite over the edge.
Yeah.
Say, I support, free Palestine. Is that? Do we need to get that over the line into extremism now? Yeah, it's like when the COVID debate was happening,
and they were calling Trump voters extremists. Yeah. Just remember, people, what they tried to do to MAGA using counter-extremism. Yeah, and remember, we spoke out against it at the time with all the authority that we brought to that debate, and we said it is absolutely ludicrous to call MAGA domestic terrorists.
But the problem with this one, Maajid, is this is
brown people.
This is actual people.
Brown people.
Actual children. Yeah. It's like worthlessness. The worthlessness of this. It's like,
bro. So listen, you've got last words because it's been an hour and a half, and as you know, I've got to rush somewhere. So I'm going to throw it to you. Any last reflections on this?
The last reflection on this is guys, try and think critically about this. And if we're going to use that word humanism, you've got to put it. And I said this in New York ages ago. If you're going to use the word humanism, use it across the board. Use it when the Venezuelan government tries to privatize rainwater, which is exactly what we did. We came out and anywhere where it's happening, you turn around and you go, okay, there's a mother and its child. They say that when you have a mother and his child, that energy that plays in between those two, that is the purest example of the divine light. So when they're talking about light and dark, I think that explains, does it? I think that makes the point.
Well, I'm going to show people this. That remember, this is literally why I got sacked. Yeah, is you see there in the bottom there in the height. This is a Guardian, Sunday Guardian. It's called The Observer. This is the Guardian website. Has this article. The subheading: the radio host has been criticised for his tweets on the coronavirus and U.S. elections. Why am I showing you this? What interest do I have defending Trump and saying Biden fixed the elections in 2020 and betrayed, as a result, half the country and turned on all you MAGA voters and tried to call you terrorists? I'm living in London. I gained nothing apart from losing my job saying Biden fixed the 2020 elections. The Guardian comes after me, as you can see. As you can see there, and commentary on the US elections. It's stated on record. That's why they got rid of me. The coronavirus, COVID mandate opposition. And because I was saying by the way, when it was happening in November 2020, that this is being fixed. I gained nothing from doing that. I lost my family's only source of income. But to Osman's point, because the truth is the truth. Goodness for goodness sake. We were trying to say, this is the truth. They're fixing the election. It's all going to come out soon. You'll believe us one day. They thought I was crazy at the time because we believe in speaking out for people who are not us, but are our human brethren. And
the world's gone crazy right now, Maajid.
We're asking everybody to do the same. Now, listen, we've got to go. I've got to go to a meeting, very important, to see if we can try and fix some of this. But we're working behind the scenes, Osman, as you know, as well. We'll be back next week, regular time, 3 p.m. Apologies, I was late today. I had to go and get my best friend since I was 11 years old out of prison. He finished his sentence, and hopefully he can pick his life up again. By the way, he came out with 3 bags, and he goes, Maajid, I've got a Quran and a prayer mat in one of these. So, mashallah, you know what I mean? He's
Normally normally this show would have been full of smiles with that.
I know. I told him we're going to meet, me and him, and we'll have a nice catch up over a meal. But first, this Friday, I'm going to go down Southend and see him, and then we'll organize it for us 3 to meet as well. But we'll be back, folks, next weekend, same time. Next Tuesday, same time. Do you know why I keep saying next weekend, by the way? You see the tragedy of it. That was the weekend show on LBC. And I'd say back next weekend, regular time for the regular weekend show, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock on Saturdays and Sundays. Look at that. Anyway, we'll be back next Tuesday, not weekend, at 3 p.m. UK time. What was it, 11 US time? It's a bit weird now because our clocks just changed. So whatever it is in America, but it will be 3 p.m. UK time. I think we're now 6 hours behind EST. And as usual, the podcast version of this will be released on Radical Media. What I've decided to do is instead of releasing the article first, we'll do the live stream, and then I'll take all the receipts we'll put in the article, write it up on Radical Media, and then put the podcast all in one thing together for everyone to receive. Yeah. And so subscribers to Radical Media will obviously get access to the podcast, but everybody else, the sign up, you get free access to the article, definitely. And we'll see you next week, folks. This has been Warrior Creed, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
About to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
This service announcement brought to you in part by